Welcome to the Breadwinners, the podcast about the never-ending hustle and its impact on all aspects of our lives. We're interested in what it takes to keep everything going. This podcast is about women, working, money, and family. We consider the research, talk to experts, and share our takes on what we're learning every day about breadwinning. I'm Jennifer Owens. I write about working, wellness, and women, and founded the Working Mother Research Institute. And on most days, I'm joined by my co-host, Raquel Ellison. On this episode of The Breadwinners, I'm joined by Aliza Freud, founder and CEO of SheSpeaks, an influencer marketing agency founded in 2007 to amplify women's voices. Today, her network of 250,000 female influencers reaches 300 million consumers every month, and her team works with brands nationwide. All of which is to say, welcome, Aliza.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jennifer.
Oh, well, you've got the ear of the nation, so, we got to hear what they're saying. So I feel like, Dateline, Breadwinners. So, oh my gosh, I have gone off the deep end. I will swim back to shore now. Well, so here we often like to start with a stat. And so, I was looking into like women-owned businesses. And so here's the stat we have. That more than 11.6 million firms are owned by women. That's an awesome number. We employ nearly 9 million people. Super awesome. We generate $1.7 trillion in sales as of 2017. All good numbers. But only 4% of women-owned firms have revenues of $1 million or more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I would say, what does that freaking say to you? Because it says, oh, that's my business right there. Tiny.
Yeah. Well, it says to me that women are not getting funding as much as men do, right?
Yep.
We know that women are not getting funded at the rate that men, male-owned and started businesses do. So it's partially that. And I think also there's a little bit of this that is that, women, we are so earnest and want to get it right and cautious.
Yep.
I think about how we do things that I think sometimes women are not necessarily seeing their businesses as big as they can be.
Yeah.
Because they are creating these amazing businesses that, in my opinion, should easily have more than $1 million in revenue. But maybe, they just don't feel that they can confidently get there.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of the fact that, women don't have access to the capital that maybe men get access to. And also just a little bit of a confidence issue that, women, we are, as I said, we are so earnest and want to get it right that we get a little bit fearful about how big can big be. So I think it's a little bit about also women getting to dream bigger.
The wonderfulness of the pandemic that we're living through has been the Paycheck Protection Program, at least for me, that I applied for it. I received a chunk of cash, and that chunk of cash really reset the way I think, because before then, totally business, thinking about how to make my business work and the like, but I'd never had like capital to work with. I was always eat what you kill, and so it's constantly scramble.
Right.
And to have a little air to say, well, now what could I do? What could I dream up with this? One of those things is this podcast, that like, what if I invested in myself?
Yeah.
And do it. And you hear me talk oddly in this odd voice about it because I had written all these stories in Working Mother about show me the money, show women the money, until I actually experienced what investment, even at that small amount, I didn't really get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. You see these VC stats where something like women-led companies get like 7% of the VC funding out there. I mean, my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you dream if you don't have it?
Yeah. And I think that's an excellent point. I think that there's probably connection between the two things that I was talking about in terms of why there aren't more, women-owned businesses that are over $1 million in revenue. You do have to have some runway in terms of cash to feel like you can dream big, right? And since women aren't getting the funding that men are getting, how are you supposed to have the air to dream big? And having capital, access to capital, is a really important part of that.
And part of that, because it's terrifying to hire people, I must say. So, and you have an actual, I was mentioning to you before that Maura Aarons Mele, who we love her on our podcast. We talked about her all the time. Friend of the podcast, even though she doesn't realize it. But she talks about entrepreneur porn.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's, aren't I great? It's empowerment and da, da, da. They're like, what?
Mhm. Yeah.
And the reality is a lot of scrambling, worry, hustle,
Yeah.
and success and failure and all the things that mix into it. And so,
Yes.
as someone who's actually created an actual company beyond solopreneur like I am, so tell me, so how do we do it?
Well, for me, it was always about, before I started my company, the She Speaks, and have been doing this now since, as you said, since 2007. I only really had one other job before that, and that was in corporate America. I worked for the same company for over, 10 years.
Yeah.
And I had, over time when I was there, I started off like really basically right out of college. But as I grew there, I built my team, right? You grow your team, you get more
Hmm.
people to work with you, and as you get more responsibility. And I think one of the biggest differences in, when you go from being a solo contributor to having a team of people working, or some people working for you, is you basically have to make the transition from being a doer to an enabler, right? And for
Oh, yeah.
me, that was the way I approached entrepreneurship. That, yes, while I was starting, and I started my business without funding, we did end up doing what I would call a light Series A
Hmm.
in 2009, and have not done funding since then. We've basically been able to build the business from that. But when I started, we did not have funding. I self funded. And I knew that maybe to start with, it was just going to be me. But my vision for it was always that I wanted to help other people get jobs and, support their families. That was a big part of my, wanting to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't just me wanting to kind of start my own thing. It was also for the purpose of creating jobs. So I think that was always what I had in mind, which is why that was the path for me.
Yeah.
And so really, I think the trick about taking on those things, because of course I do understand, I started off by myself, and it's very different when you're just responsible for yourself versus being responsible for somebody else and their
Right.
family. It's really a matter of learning, how do you create the business so that you have runway, right? I mean,
Yes.
and it's all about cash flow. I know everybody says this. I heard it over and over and over again from entrepreneurs, funded entrepreneurs, non-funded entrepreneurs. It's still ultimately about cash flow and, do you have runway? So I had to learn pretty early, how do I create enough runway for the business that I can not feel like, you live with your heart in your throat. And there were
Right.
certainly times over, in the beginning where I did not have that figured out. It was a process. It
Hmm.
was a painful process
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And learning, you learn, and hopefully it doesn't take you that long to figure it out. Certainly, you hopefully get enough time that you can figure it out. And I think I did have experience, but I also think there was luck involved, that I was able to make it sort of to a point where I figured it out before we ran out of runway.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
If you ever seen, there's a Fast and the Furious movie where they attack a plane on a runway, and there's somebody's done an estimate on how long that runway is. It's like 28 miles for all the things that happen on this airplane. So, don't be like Fast and the Furious. That's a fake runway. You
Right.
got to get up in the air before 28 miles.
Right. Right. And you have to be realistic. And that's the thing I think that you learn is how, as you go, what you learn is to be smarter and smarter about how you are making projections,
Hmm.
and what you need in order to feel comfortable. And everyone has a different tolerance for that pain of, how much runway do I have? I figured out what my pain tolerance was and then said, okay, this is the amount of runway I always need. And
Right.
so, but that's trial and error. You have to, like, I don't know if it's just me. I would imagine that that this is kind of a similar experience for other entrepreneurs. You don't know that right out of the gate. You have to experience it. Maybe you only need to experience it once to figure it out, but you've got to experience it to really determine what you need.
Right. Yeah. I was having a conversation in a business group a couple of months ago, and somebody was saying, well, I really want to get to the point where I'm hiring people and this and that. And one of the coaches in the group said, well, now realize that that's a different business than what you have as a solopreneur, because you're going to have to up your revenues significantly
Mm-hmm.
to cover it. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
structuring, you can do it. It's just you can't think incrementally at that point. You need to think like wholesale
Yeah.
if you're going to bring someone in. And these are why these conversations are so important, because you're kind of locked in this idea of I just need help. Oh my goodness. But
Mm-hmm.
if you want to get there, either you need to grow and be the best solopreneur that you're going to be and bring in help, contractors as you need them, or you're going to become something different, which is a true company with employees and the revenue to support, that it's just interesting to think it's that these things are the way you structure your business.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. And that's what I was saying before too. You need to be realistic about what
Yeah.
it's going to take. I think I certainly, and I can't speak for all entrepreneurs, obviously, but I do know that there are a good number of us who are optimistic by nature. I think
Mhm.
in some ways you have to feel a certain sense of optimism to do this because there's always something that comes up. And I think that sometimes can be a hard thing. The other side of that is, you really need to be incredibly thoughtful about projecting what you're going to need. And if you think you're being somewhat aggressive, scale back to make it more conservative, because
Right.
assume that it's going to cost you slightly more. If you're hiring resources, assume it's going to cost you slightly more than you think, because it's not going to cost you less. So,
Like
so
renovating your kitchen, right?
yeah,
Like it's always going to be more,
exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
and you're banking on people paying you on time, and you need to have all that built in, which gets us back to funding. That now I feel like, like I've seen the light, like that the power of funding is to help you have that time to figure all that out
Right.
and to literally invest in yourself so that you could bring someone on board, so you can make more relationships for business development because you have doers while you're dreaming and partnering. And it's just, and so when you starve female owned companies of the fuel, of the gas they need to drive the
Mhm.
car, it's,
Mhm.
it's, it's so terrible for our economy. You're just hampering everyone,
Yeah.
to not be able to grow.
Yes, agreed. And so it is a big part, I think, of what allows businesses to kind of get out there into the stratosphere and really accelerate. But even once you get an investment, then you have, effectively have shareholders. So then it's a
Yes,
matter
that is
of,
the other side, right? That you give up some freedom
yes.
in exchange for much like, not just the financial freedom of if it's a loan, you have to pay that loan back, but if you
Mhm.
have investors, that's the other you see that a lot in these male-owned companies that did get all the VC money, that they are forced to scale at a rate
Mhm.
that's astronomical and not uncommonly destroys their company.
Yes.
So there
Yes.
is the power of bootstrapping that to
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you can, it's great. If you can bootstrap and get the growth that you want, it's an awesome way to go. There
yeah,
are definitely pros and cons
right.
to different routes. And that's why I think it's a very personal decision for the entrepreneur which route they decide to go. I can see, I mean, I obviously know a lot of people who've taken VC, and for
Yeah.
them, it could be absolutely the right decision. But like anything, you have to go into it with your eyes open and know what you're taking on, and what it's going to mean for your business, what it's going to mean for your share of mind. I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of it. I think a lot about what I call share of mind and what am I spending my time thinking about and worrying about. And I prioritize what is it that I want to be worrying about, because you're going to worry about something, right? That's just the way it works.
Right.
So you have to be really thoughtful about, as I said, the share of mind. How am I going to spend my emotional energy, my time, all of that?
Well, and then meanwhile, there was a pandemic. I don't know if you heard. So,
Nope.
which, in my world, especially, first quarter, we were still billing the first quarter. So, we kind of slid. You weren't quite sure what it was. The middle of, summer was pretty dang slow when it came to clients and billing. And now we're coming back. And I don't know, it's hard. We're in a new year. What does business look like? Like, what are you thinking about with momentum, with revenue, with clients? What's the chitter chatter out there? Tell me.
It's a great question. And I think that, again, with the types of businesses we work with, and we tend to work with very large corporations
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, we work on campaigns and marketing, influencer marketing for, very large brands. So I can only speak, from that perspective of those are the types of businesses that we're working with. And
Yeah.
I think by and large, what happened was they had, a lot of these businesses have very strong fundamentals in terms of how they're doing, but COVID hit and everybody pulled back, right? Because
Yeah.
it was a
Here.
huge unknown.
Right.
And, there was, I think, a period of time where people were pulling back. And then I think what started to happen was people are now starting to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel
Mm,
and there is more spending going on. Or maybe people got to the end of the year and they were like, wait a second, you probably
yeah.
know this, but the way a lot of corporations work, if you don't spend your budget, you lose it in terms of in the new year. So we used to say in my old company, use it or lose it. So
Right.
if you don't spend that money the following year, when you go to justify the budget that you're asking for, they say, well, why didn't you spend this? You didn't need this much
Yeah. You didn't need it.
last
Right.
year. So, I mean, I know this is a different year, but I think what happened was we got to the end of the year with certain clients and they were like, wait a second, we've got extra budget, which is not a terrible place for them to be. I do think that things are starting to open up in terms of spending. A lot of it, though, will depend on how the economy does moving into the next year, at least for us.
Yeah. Right.
How the macro economy does play a role in business spending, in the businesses we work with in their spending.
Right. Especially with consumer spending.
Yeah.
They want to get the consumers to spend. You guys really are the leading edge of the first canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So we definitely were seeing that things seem to be opening up, but I think there's a little bit of, caution going into it to see how the economy is
Right.
going to do in the new year.
It really is, it constantly like just kind of waiting for the next, terrible economic thing to happen. But the weird thing is that the stock market has done great, but the job losses are terrible,
Yeah.
but the stimulus is here. It's hard to talk about a foggy outlook. Oh my goodness.
Right. Exactly. And that those things don't necessarily, just because the stock market's doing well does not mean that the economy is doing well. Those things don't necessarily go hand in hand. So yeah,
Obviously not.
yeah,
As
exactly.
I used to have to cover I used to have to write about the consumer price index and
Hmm.
the producer price index for like warehouse stuff, the wholesale numbers. And I just think, oh my goodness, I feel for these economics reporters that have to write about these economic stories every month. What does it all mean? We don't know.
Right. Exactly. Well, it's like forecasting the weather, right?
Right? I mean, now I had a wonderful editor when I was at Women's Wear Daily, and I was constantly doing, like I'd interview 6 economists, and five of them would say, "Oh, it's going to be a bad
Mm,
whatever quarter,"
yeah.
and then one would say it'd be good, and I'd cover all of them, and my boss would say, "Jennifer, what is the answer?" And I'd say, "I don't know. That's what they said." And now I realize, I should have, 5-1. I think the 5 we have to go. But at the time I didn't know how to like edit myself. Everybody goes in the story.
Yeah.
But yeah. every quarter. Jennifer.
Great.
I was too young to be covering the economy at that point. I think that's what the moral of that story is right there. Now I have a much different view of the economy than I did back then as a single person working for a corporation,
That's right. That's the thing about experience, right? So, with time comes that experience and you
Yeah,
take on a different perspective.
for sure. Well, and so where does She Speaks goes? I mean, do you have, what's the world? What's the horizon for She Speaks?
Well, we're lucky in the sense that we have some wind at our back when it comes to the industry that we're in. So influencer marketing has grown significantly over the last couple of years. This year, it's projected to have now a $10 billion of spend. That's up probably from $5 billion just a year and a half ago. So it's growing very quickly.
Yeah.
It has become something that I think is now part of people's marketing mix. It is a channel like a lot of other, you think about what you have in your marketing budget, and
Right.
you have direct marketing opportunities. People spend their money doing different things. You have, advertising that you spend your money on. And I think that influencer marketing is becoming one of the channels that people have just started to realize should be in their marketing mix. So from that perspective, I think the good news is that, we're not swimming upstream. And I say
Trying
that
to make the
because,
case for it. Totally get it. Yep.
and there was a time when we started,
Yep.
nobody knew what influencer marketing was. We were talking about influencers and they were like, what? What is that? Are you talking about celebrities? What are you talking about? So at least, from that perspective, we don't have people saying, what is that
What is
you
it?
do?
Yeah.
That obviously is helpful when you're trying to, talk to people about what you do. The other thing that I think for us has been good about the time we're in right now is that there is, I think, a pretty strong recognition that women are a force to be reckoned with as consumers, right? We make over 85% of the purchase decisions in this country, and that's $1 trillion of spending. I mean, it's not small potatoes. It's a lot. And I think that there is an increasing recognition that female consumers are important.
Right.
So those are the positives. What happens though, as you might imagine, when an industry is growing and there's recognition, and, for all intents and purposes, I think that the influencer marketing world has become a sexy space where people want to be in it. So with that comes competition, increased competition. So that is, I think, the thing that is inevitable. And then it's a matter of, as a business, how do you ensure that you are remaining competitive and you're evolving and you're innovating? And I have to say that for me is the fun stuff. I love that. I love that challenge of knowing that there's going to be innovation and looking and figuring out what's next. For me, the what's next is the best part of anything that we get to do. So it's a challenge, certainly, that there's more competition in our space, but I think what that breeds is innovation. And the innovation is the part I love. So I would say what's next for us is we are going to continue to just make sure that our process, how we do things, the platforms that we're on, the people, the influencers that we work with, we continue to make that better and better and, provide expertise in this space. And that's I guess what everyone hopes that they can do in their business.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on the Breadwinners.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Our guest today was Aliza Freud of SheSpeaks, and you will find links to SheSpeaks and kind of the stats we were talking about today in the episode description. Email us anytime at thebreadwinnerspod@gmail.com or visit us at thebreadwinnerspodcast.com. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and to rate and review it. It really helps us grow. And until next week, keep hustling. This
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.